Hello, and welcome to Making Creativity Pay, the podcast where we talk to people in creative industries about how they promote and market their work. I'm Dan Barnett, and on this episode I was speaking to Alexis Strum about her experiences as a singer-songwriter, comedian and actress, about going viral on TikTok and her resurgence as a pop star 20 years on. We talk about having songs she's written being recorded by Kylie, Minogue and Rachel Stevens, the impact being dropped by her record label had on her, and her determination to make the most of the opportunity the second time around. We also discuss social media, online promotion, and the psychological impact chasing clicks has on your state of mind. I started the interview by asking Alexis to give a bit more info about herself.
Hi, I'm Alexis Strum. I'm a singer-songwriter and actress. I've been acting for about 10 years. I was a singer-songwriter and pop star around 20 years ago. And this year, I had an amazing comeback, which I never expected in a million years. And I'm back making music again after all this time, which has been incredible. And my story has definitely sort of piqued people's interest this year. It's gone viral, or whatever you call it these days. It's been a really exciting year.
Yeah, so I suppose to kind of start at the beginning with music. So I mean, was that always your first love and what you wanted to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think I started life as a performance poet. Which sounds really bizarre, but back in the day, and I think it still happens, there was this sort of New York trend that swept into London of performing your poetry. So it was kind of somewhere in between reading out a poem and singing a song. And I was like very creative at school, and my art teacher really, really encouraged me to sort of pursue that. He used to give me Joni Mitchell records and stuff, so that was what got me interested in songwriting. And from that, I started writing poetry, and then I ended up going into this performance poetry scene when I was 14, which was probably very precocious, but my mum always used to go with me. It was in Hackney, and she'd always used to go along as my chaperone. But it was a really interesting introduction into performance, creativity, that side of life.
And so in terms of then getting into music and performing, mm-hmm. I mean, how do you kind of develop that? I mean, did someone say, yes, you've got a real knack for this? Or did you have to kind of knock on a lot of doors?
I think because I was really good at writing poems, I understood rhyme and structure, so it felt natural to put that to music. And I'd also started playing the guitar around 14, 15 as well. So it just felt like the most natural thing in the world to put the two together, the words and the music. And then I was in school bands and that sort of thing. And from that point, that was when I wanted to become a recording artist. And so by the time I was 16, I'd bought a 4-track and I was making my own demos in my bedroom, which nowadays makes me laugh because there's people that age on TikTok and they've got a full recording studio. They're making their own album, promoting it from there. But I guess I was ahead of my time at the time.
Yes.
So that was what I did. And then from there, I decided that was what I wanted to do. Still went to university and did all my studies and everything. But there was no such thing really as an overnight success. It was something that you had to build. And I used to buy the NME and Melody Maker every week and just apply to every single advert. So whether it was a band, a producer, whatever it was, I would just apply and think, okay, well, whatever this is, it will be experience. And I think one of the first session that I did was with Marksman, who probably no one will remember, but they were like this sort of political rap group. And I just went to the studio with them and did some demos and started to learn what a studio process was like. And from then I started working with some other writers who happened to be published. And because they were published and we wrote songs together, then the publisher, Warner Chappell, were interested in my music. And they were like, oh, who's this girl that's written on this and singing? And I got offered a publishing deal with Warner Chappell when I was 21. So it felt at the time like it took years and years and years, but 21's pretty young to be in that position. So actually, from the outside, it was quite a quick process.
That's the kind of the up. You've kind of got the record deal, mm-hmm. also going, but then it kind of doesn't quite keep going at that trajectory.
Oh, well, I got a publishing deal. I didn't get a record deal for about another 4 years. So they were very difficult years because I literally would bang on every single door, constantly going to meetings, playing them my demos and watching their reaction. And it's so painful because nowadays you just upload a track. You don't have to see the other person, but watching them and you're like, especially if it's an upbeat track and you're waiting for them to kind of bop along to it and they're just sitting there like, oh my God. So a lot of that, a lot of hustling, always been my own pushy mother. So I was just pushing. Anyone that I met, be like, listen to my music. It's great. I'm great. And kind of, yeah, very confident that back in those days that I would get there somehow. I didn't know what the route was.
And so kind of moving further forward, kind of what's been the kind of story and kind of the revival is that, things didn't quite, for whatever reason, happen, but you're kind of, moving past that and kind of getting hopefully that recognition and success that maybe didn't quite happen then.
Yeah, I mean, I got signed. So I had 2 huge major label deals at the time. So when I was about 25, and then when I was about 28, I think it was. And the records never came out because the label kind of got cold feet. So what happened was this year was 20 years or thereabouts, because I'm not that old, or thereabouts since I'd signed those deals. And my fans, I didn't know I had fans. This is the interesting thing. I didn't know I had any musical fans. It had been 20 odd years. And they just all kind of wrote to me and went, it's 20 years since you released something last or whatever. Would you be interested in trying to put it out there? And that was what was the catalyst for me to get back into music. Because I genuinely didn't know anyone had ever heard of me. I just kind of got it. I just had a life of absolute anonymity, worked in IT, was a mum, did a bit of acting, did some other little bits in showbiz, but not really very much. So it was really lovely to hear that music had its own life that I was actually nothing to do with. Those songs, yeah, they had their own journey. And I guess that's why we do it in the first place.
In that intervening 20 years, had you just kind of either fallen out of love with it or you thought,
That's exactly it.
It was.
I had absolutely fallen out of love with music. It broke my heart. It was the hardest thing to walk away from that, harder than any relationship, because I knew when I was about probably 29, 30 at the time, and I thought, there's nowhere else for me to go with this. There's no more doors I can knock on. I've literally exhausted all opportunities. And I think as someone creative, that doesn't happen very often. There's always hope. Yeah. There's always other ways in. But I literally had exhausted all routes. So I knew I had to walk away and do something else. But I loved music. It's always been my passion. And I grew up listening to music, playing music. So it was really hard to walk away from it. But I did. I literally didn't pick up the guitar for maybe 10 years. I didn't sing. I was just closed off to it. And that's heartbreaking, actually. So being back in love again is just wonderful. I'm a much happier person for it, I have to say.
Yeah. And how have you found the response for it? So obviously now you've got the physical album. I know you've performed some gigs with it. I mean, how's the response been?
The response has been, it's just been overwhelmingly lovely. I don't even mind. Actually, no one's come out there and said, you have this voice in your head, like with the worst possible comments that people could say, and I thought I'd get lots of like, oh, you're too old, or go away, or whatever. No one said that, actually. Probably just the voices in my head. So it's all been very much like, I've had loads of personal messages where people have written to me and said, do you know what, thanks to you, I've gone out and pushed myself to write that book or whatever, just because they've seen, and it's not because I'm wonderful or particularly talented, it's just that I've persevered. Yeah. And I've kind of followed fate, in a sense, because fate came calling this year. I could have just gone, do you know what? I'm actually earning really good money in my IT job. I don't want to be doing music, whatever. But instead I thought, no, I'm going to walk away from a really decent job that I'm now regretting. I'm going to walk away from a decent job and actually go for it, which is terrifying, I have to say. Absolutely terrifying.
So did you feel then that if you were going to do it, you do it properly? You wouldn't try and, side hustle even this weekend. You thought if it's going to be done, it should be done properly.
Yeah, it's the side hustle thing's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because it's with all these creative endeavours, you can do it to an extent as a side hustle, but there's always a point at which you have to make that leap. And I felt very much that it was getting to the point where I was doing my job and then I was trying to promote stuff, because I do most of the promotion myself, trying to do all of that on the side. I just couldn't do it. I was exhausted. So I knew that was the point at which there was that leap, and I had to make that leap of faith. Much like, as I said, there was a point at which I knew that was the end of things for me with music. I feel like these things are actually very clear, and if you listen to your gut, you know when that's happening. And I knew I had to go for it full time. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, who gets a second chance at 46? It just doesn't happen. So I'm not going to get a third chance. This is it. If I don't, grab the bull by the horns now, that's it.
Yeah. I can kind of understand that, if the albums don't come out, but some of the songs then were then performed by Kylie, Rachel Stevens. So, you've got that validation, they're not going to put out any old tat. You've got that they know that you can write a good song. But that even that wasn't kind of enough to kind of think, I've got something here.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you said that, I thought, I don't believe you. And I think that's just because I have quite low self-esteem, although I'm very confident. And I didn't feel that way. Even though they took my songs, I still felt like a failure. And I did for the largest part of, the last 10, 15 years. I felt like I failed at music. And I think the worst thing I did actually was to call myself a failure and an also ran. And I made a whole shtick of it. I did a comedy night. We just spoke beforehand about all the different things I've done. I used to do this comedy night called The Time I Almost, and I kind of take the mickey out myself, and I almost was a pop star. And actually, it didn't help me. It didn't help me to do that, to make myself the butt of the joke. And now I say to people, oh yeah, I'm a pop star. Even though I'm not like a big name one, I'm doing it. And I think I didn't take any of that stuff seriously. Even when Kylie was singing my song, I still felt like, I never made it. But there you go. That's confidence for you, isn't it? It's a tricky thing.
So, I mean, like you said, there's number of different areas you've worked in. So comedy, podcasting. Did anything in particular kind of interest you, or you just wanted to try lots of different things and kind of see what worked, what didn't?
I think what's underneath all of them is that I have a view of the world that I feel is interesting enough to share, whether it's in a song or a script or a podcast, experiences that I've had that I think people will relate to. So it's always been like, I'm just trying to find out the right vehicle. And at certain times I kind of might feel that I want to be isolated and sit and write on my own, or I might feel like I want to go out and sing something I've written. And it really just is like, it's been a long career. So I guess everyone goes through changes in their career and wants to do different things. And I feel like they all complement each other in a weird way. Podcasting I found quite difficult because there's so much, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And yeah, I'm not sure if I was the best at hosting a podcast. We'll see. Time will tell. But I feel like certain things are more natural to me. So being on a stage and performing or singing is completely natural. I don't get nerves. I'm like, get me on there. I'm ready. And I've always been like that. But it's weird because then there's also that part of me that's, as I said, really low self-esteem. So I'm kind of always in this internal battle. But usually the tits and tinsel kind of wins, and I get on stage and do it, if I'm allowed to say those words. Tinsel obviously is a swear word.
It's not environmentally friendly anymore, so yes.
No, it's not. I know.
Trouble for that. In terms of that, so acting, you talk about gatekeepers. I mean, do you still find in things like that acting that it's still very difficult? You have to still knock on a lot of doors, or is it a lot easier now in the more of a digital age where where you can do more things remotely, online, you can get noticed in other ways?
It's really a good question. And I think I can really compare the two because I've done the two for quite long periods of time. The gatekeepers have changed in music, so that is now easier. So if I wanted to get my track, if I was interested in getting my track on the radio, I could probably just email a DJ, and if they like it, they'll play it. Whereas it used to be that there was literally one person that made that decision across the whole of the network, and that was it. So actually that is easier to get myself noticed. Acting, in fact, it feels like it's more, there's more gatekeepers. It's harder. There's more actors around than there were pre-COVID, and then because there was less work, we're all kind of scrabbling for the same jobs now. So I've found that's a lot harder. It doesn't matter if I knock on the doors. Sometimes I'm just not going to get seen. I think as well what's interesting is that with acting, casting directors, producers are now looking at your social media profile when they're casting. So it's not enough to be the best actor in the room. You've got to have some kind of social media presence or something to you, something else to you. And I would argue with anyone that says that isn't true, because it is very much true. So that's a lot harder, because then obviously you've got that responsibility of just always trying to be online and creating content. which in itself is exhausting, you know, and that's like a second job to the acting or whatever. Same with music though. You know, a lot of artists have been, big artists as well, have been complaining about their label losing faith in them because they don't have, you know, that many TikTok followers or whatever. And it's a little bit arbitrary, definitely.
And in terms of the other areas, because I know you're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all those kind of things. When you're trying to produce stuff, are you quite disciplined to say, I need to do 5 pieces a week, I need to do something every day? And how much of work and preparation goes into all that kind of thing?
So I'm incredibly disciplined. I've always had a list ever since I was 14. I don't think I've ever completed it, so it just goes on and on. I write everything down religiously. I don't have my notebook with me, but I've always got a notebook and a planner and a plan of what I'm trying to achieve at that particular point. So nothing is left to chance. So even if it's just like at the moment I'm planning what my next single will be, I'm also planning the content that will support that, planning live gigs to go around that, planning writing sessions for the next album, etc. So there's so much that's all being planned at the same time. I don't have a lot of time because I'm a single parent, so it's made me even more disciplinarian with my time. But I think that's actually been a good thing, because I think I say no to lots of things I would have said yes to previously that probably wouldn't help me, just because I was eager to please. And like, if someone asks you to do something, you're like, wow, yes, of course, I'd love to. But now I do less of that kind of stuff and more on my terms. What do I want to do? Is this going to help me? Is this going to help the music? Is it going to help the acting?
Yeah. Do you kind of feel that, say, the comedy helps the music in that everything that boosts your profile is a good, or do you see them as kind of separate things?
At the moment, I'm trying to do less comedy stuff because I think that can be confusing, especially in TikTok, which is very siloed. I think if I'm doing comedy stuff all the time as well, people just kind of don't understand what you are. You need to just be one thing in TikTok land. Different in Instagram, Twitter, but you know, they're different markets. But it's a tricky one. It's a tricky balancing act. Yeah.
I've kind of been religiously on Twitter for God knows how many years, but obviously that tanking, I've kind of, you know, I'm probably like about 15 years behind the curve. I've moved on to Instagram now a little bit, and I kind of think about doing TikTok, because I mean, a lot of the time people say that, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of grow quickly or have something that gets a good response on TikTok, whereas the others, it's all about your follow account. With TikTok, it can kind of mushroom quite big. I mean, looking at yours, you know, there's some there that have like 500,000 views. So, you know, some things just go crazy.
Yeah, you could literally build a profile within a week if you have something that goes viral. But my goodness, is it hard to do? And the thing is, thinking about your last question, actually, I have to be very careful, because one of the things that I do that's a comedy thing is I do this character who pretends that she was the PA to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And every time I do a post, it does go very viral. It gets like a few 100,000 views normally. But I have to be really careful, because I don't want to end up in that niche. That puts me in a very small pocket. And equally, if I'm trying to promote my music, I'm not sure that those two go hand in hand. So you have to be careful. If you want to go viral on TikTok, it is actually very easy, but you have to be incredibly calculated about what it is you want to go viral for, because whatever that is, you will be stuck doing that for the foreseeable future. And then if you change it, no one's going to watch your videos anymore. So if it's something like you're in an awkward position, but you do a funny shtick each time, you're going to have to do that each time. You're going to have a bad back, right? And that's kind of it. And then you can try and replicate something that's done really well on TikTok that you've had success with. And the next day, it will get like 200 views. And you sit there and you're like, why? I've tagged it the same. It's the same. It's the same room. I'm wearing the same outfit. It is very much potluck. But if you come up with a concept that is out there enough and random enough, then yes, you can go viral very quickly. Twitter, I think, is a very different one. I mean, the stuff that I have that goes viral on Twitter is always, if I post tweet threads, I mean, we should say X, right? But if I post threads, they tend to go viral because I make them into little stories, and I'll plan those out so there'll be like a 10-part, and it will, you know, there's some sort of payoff at the end or whatever. And that's a really good way to grow an audience, I've found. that's been really useful for me, and it opened a lot of doors to people that would never have heard of me before. Especially actually if I post stuff about creativity or process or stuff that's uplifting and how to keep going in the industry, that tends to do really well on there. And Instagram, I'm still kind of figuring Instagram out. I mean, do you like it? Do you enjoy it?
It's interesting. I mean, it's pretty good for a short while, just a quick look, and then that's fine. With Twitter, you get all the good and the bad with Twitter. So Twitter, you can spend forever on, because there's always new stream of content. With Instagram, once you've seen 300 photos of people having a great time, you kind of think, I'm kind of done with that now.
Yeah, you're right, actually. It's more time constrained, isn't it? I think Twitter, as you say, TikTok, you could literally spend a week on TikTok and not sleep, because I tell you what, scrolling through, there's stuff I've learned about humans that I would love to unknow, really. I mean, some of the stuff that people like, and I'll watch it for hours and I think, what am I doing? It like puppies being fed their breakfast. Someone's just put a camera on them. There's hamsters in a wheel, and I'll sit and watch that for a few minutes, maybe an hour. Bonkers, isn't it? It's just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, kind of one thing I'm interested in talking to creative people about is that everything has a metric now. So, like you said, every tweet you post, everything you put on TikTok, you will know whether it's 5 people, 500 people, 500,000 people have liked it, watched it, whatever. I mean, how does that kind of mess with your head, that kind of you're constantly being judged, basically?
Should I give you the honest answer or the showbiz answer?
No, the honest answers.
The honest one. Okay, the honest answer, it breaks me. If I've put hours into like an acoustic version of a song or a sketch that I think is brilliant and it gets 200 views and literally no one even comments, I die inside every single time. And it's really hard. I try to limit the amount of time that I'm on social media to stop that from happening. But you can't. It is constant rejection. And yeah, it's really hard. I don't know how you get on top of that, because the highs are massive highs and the lows are massive lows. And when you get a video that gets, and every time you look at it, it's going up and up and up and up, and you keep looking at it, it's incredibly addictive. It's like going to the arcade, or going to Vegas. And of course, when you have a really huge video and then the next one doesn't do as well, you think that you're a failure because you're not as good as yourself. So all kinds of emotional, psychological stuff comes up. And it is probably not very good for our mental health, especially because I put myself across many different platforms, even dabbling in LinkedIn. Putting stuff on LinkedIn now as well. So I'm a fool for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's so kind of difficult that you'll put your worth into these random things, and if it can just be if one person with a decent following amplifies it, then boom. So there's no real a lot of the time there's no real difference necessarily in the quality of what you've done or the worth of it, but the success can be wildly varying.
Yeah, I think as well, the thing that I really struggle with is comparison. I look at other people, my peers, and seeing what they're up to and what their stats are and their metrics, and I absolutely get into a cycle of jealousy. It's horrible. I'm wearing a green top. No one can see this, but you get green with envy, and it's awful, and it really affects your mood. And then something pulls you out of yourself, like you've got to make dinner for your family or whatever, and you think, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? It doesn't matter. But yes, they're genuine feelings at the time. There's something I auditioned for, actually, funnily enough, a few months ago, and I looked up to see who got the part, and it's someone that I know, that I'm always up against. And I was like, damn it. And it really spoiled my evening. So I'm going to kill them. That's basically the upshot.
Just break their legs. You don't have to kill them. You don't go that far.
Yeah, just break their legs a little bit. Just a bit.
No. So you were saying as well that possibly writing a book about the whole experience, is that a kind of an ambition, or is that kind of being formed as we speak?
I mean, I've written the majority of it. It's whether or not I get it published. And also, I'm not sure it's quite the right time, because I feel like I'm still in my story at the moment. And I'd written it before all of this happened with the music this year. So I'm now looking at it through a fresh lens, and I'm not sure it's quite the book I want to write. But I do have a book in me about the whole experience of, you know, these sort of abortive missions in creativity, every single one of them has led me to a really cool place or led me to do other things. So yeah, I mean, it's so weird, isn't it? The other day I was thinking I really need to find a recording studio to record some new stuff. And then I went into WH Smith to buy a copy of this magazine that I'm in, Retropop. And I was chatting to the guy that worked there, and I went, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, but I'm actually in this. Do you mind if I film it a little bit?" And he was like, "No." He went, "Oh, I make music. I've got my own studio." And it was like, wow, you know, if you kind of put yourself out there, it's not enough to have the intention. You've got to talk about it to people. Now, my mum was always the kind of person that said, "Oh, don't tell anyone, because if it doesn't work out, you'd be really embarrassed." And the thing is, I've embraced being embarrassed. All of my failures are out there. So I talk about it to people because then it makes it real for me. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it's really worked for me to just be talking about it and putting on Twitter, "Oh, I'm in the studio. I'd like to write some more songs. I don't know if I'll get the opportunity." And then people kind of come back with their thoughts. It's great. It's a great dialogue.
Yeah, I think that's true, that you have to put yourself out there. But it's a lot easier said than done, because yes, you know, someone will then say, "Oh, you said you were writing a song 9 months ago," and then you haven't done it yet.
Yeah, but you know, the funniest thing is, and I was saying this to a friend the other day, no one cares. No one remembers. So I could say, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and hype it up, and then it doesn't happen. No one's really going to notice because so much is going on in the world and I'm not that important. So I think it's the fears that we have. We imagine that everyone's sitting there watching our every move. "Oh, Dan said he was going to do this. He said he was going to write a book and he hasn't. I'm going to write to him now and tell him that he hasn't." Whereas no one, we're all just so busy in our own lives and caught up in our little echo chambers that I think you can just say 1 minute, "Oh, I'm going to write a book now," and just see what comes of it. Because you saying that and putting it out there, someone might say, "Oh, well, actually, I can give you some help with that," or "I know someone that's looking for a book like you've just described." And I'd much rather have those opportunities than not say anything at all.
My next guest, I'm speaking to in a couple of days, he's an author, and he's written a book in association with ChatGPT. So it's not like just put a prompt in and it spits out 30,000 words, but it's a much more iterative kind of process. I don't know kind of what your thoughts are on kind of how that would work with songwriting. You know, do you ever use anything for inspiration, or would you use anything for inspiration?
No, and weirdly, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. There was something I saw on my Instagram this morning, which was a chord prompt. And basically, you put any chord into it and it tells you all of the other chords that will go with it. So that when you're songwriting, it sort of helps narrow the field. And I thought, oh my God, I would hate to have that, because I like to think that inspiration comes like, whoa, this sort of thing from the universe. I don't want to cramp that or put boundaries on it. So no, I'm probably the opposite. But I am really interested in GPT and AI in general. I was fascinated by the version of Houdini, the Dua Lipa song, that they got a Miley Cyrus AI to sing it. And it sounded exactly like Miley Cyrus. That terrifies me, but also impresses me in equal measure. And I think that more will come. Obviously, there's just been the strike in America over exactly this, and the use of your likeness or image or whatever, or voice. And yes, that will be a thing. But you cannot create something that is going to emotionally touch people in the same way as that human spirit can. And everything that I've kind of read from ChatGPT, yes, it sounds like a Seinfeld script or whatever, but it hasn't got that human touch to it. They'll probably get there. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time it'll be, we'll just do a rough. You'll get the computer to do a rough draft, and then you'll get a human to do the rest. Because I think they're talking about that, you know, with some kind of animation and things like that. You'll get some initial styles from AI, but then making it look, you know, getting it from 6 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 is then the human, instead of getting a human to do the whole thing.
I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's, you know, whatever it takes to get whatever it is that you want to get out of you. I'm all for that, and I think everyone has a different process. I've always been very much like, I'm looking at my desk at the moment. I've got a little pad of Post-it notes and a pen, and I'll just scribble ideas as I go around or sing them into my phone. And it's little bits and bits and bits, and then at some moment they'll all kind of crystallize into a shape, and it might be a song or a script or a sketch or whatever. And that's my process, but that doesn't mean that that's the right thing for everybody, and everyone has their own way of getting there, haven't they? So Yes, whatever your way in is, I'll be very interested about this book as well.
Yeah.
I'll listen to that.
Yeah. It's really bad. I think you kind of end up being up at 3 a.m. almost the kind of whole kind of writing process and kind of having this kind of relationship with ChatGPT. It's kind of bananas. So for you now, what do the kind of next 6 to 12 months look like? Do you have you said you kind of write things down. You're quite focused. I mean, do you think March I want to single out, June I want another single? Are you that structured, or is it a bit more free flowing?
Yeah, it's very structured because I have a house with a mortgage and I have to be structured and consider it my job rather than just some sort of airy-fairy, oh man, I'm going to write a song about the universe. I've got to have some structure there. So I've got singles and releases planned up till the summer. And then really around that, I've left room for things to happen. So my goals are to get a publishing deal for my music and be writing for other people, to have new music out by myself. I've got acoustic projects that I'm going to do as well. And I'd love to do some great acting roles next year, maybe with singing. It's not something I've ever really done before, so that would be interesting. A lot of it is goals, but there is a structure there. And there's a point at which, again, I've built in a buffer of if something doesn't happen by a certain point, I will have to look at other options, i.e. going back to work in IT. And it's not the worst thing in the world, so that's fine. But there's always that little plan in there for what if no one likes anything that I do? Any of the videos, the music, the acting, da-da-da-da-da-da. There's got to be a plan there because, I just don't want to be an annoyance. I don't want to be like Jane McDonald popping up, singing at your wedding and singing in your bedroom and she's just there everywhere. So, no offense to Jane McDonald, she's wonderful. But I don't want to get to the point where I feel like I did that time 20 years ago, standing, looking at all the options and going, okay, I've exhausted everything. I will not let myself get to that point. That was quite a bleak answer. Yes. I'm going to be really successful in 2024, Dan. That's
the way. Yeah. I mean, are you able to kind of, I don't want to kind of put this in, live with that pressure that, you need to, this isn't just a bit of fun. It is the day job.
Am I able to live with it? I'm finding it really hard, I'll be honest with you. It's been only a couple of months that I've sort of been doing it full time and thinking, okay, what next? I don't know. I mean, a lot of my answer is going to be I don't know. As much as we can plan for stuff and say, well, this is going to happen then and I'm going to release this. Anything could happen, but anything could happen in a super positive way. I could wake up tomorrow and someone is making a movie and they happen to hear my song because they saw something on Twitter and my song is the big song from the movie. And then that gives me a whole other year paid for that I can pursue all the artistic things I want to do. And that's kind of the gamble that I live in hope of. And that's why I keep going, because I know that those things happen. I've had that happen to me and I know it can happen again. And it can come from any source. So I'm kind of just got to keep myself out there. But it's hard. It's a pressure. I think if I was single, if I was still living with my parents, these things would be very different. And actually 20 years ago when I was doing music, I didn't have those pressures. Yep. So it was very easy for me to just think, it doesn't matter if this doesn't work out. Yeah, it is a pressure, but I think anyone that's ever written a book or written a TV show or done an album, whatever it is, you've kind of got to go through that. You've got to go through that and think, what am I doing? Otherwise, nothing gets made, Paintings don't get painted. That's a terrible turn of phrase, but books don't get written, albums don't get made. So you kind of have to take that risk. And I do feel like sometimes the universe points you in a direction, and I feel like the universe is definitely pointing me in the direction of doing this for now. And there's enough synchronicity and signs and coincidences, it feels like it's right. I think when you stop getting those, then it's kind of a bit of a sign as well, without sounding too woo-woo and crazy and out there.
And to make that leap, I mean, did you have weeks of sleepless nights, or were you... No, because you've had the taste before. You were, you want to do it, and it was kind of a no-brainer.
Not so much sleepless nights. I found that planning really helped, And actually marking out what I want to do on paper really helped. And I guess that some of your listeners might be in between creative endeavours or sort of deciding between them. I did take some things off the list, actually. Like, I was thinking of doing a podcast about the time all the music stuff that I'd done. And it's still there, but it's on another list because I can't do that and do all the other stuff at the same time. It was just like, there's so much I'm interested in. So I put some things on the back burner and that helped. And I think focusing on just the music and the acting at the moment for me feels like, although those are both huge things, that takes the pressure off a little bit. So not as many sleepless nights since I've done my planning. And I've also, I think it's really useful to talk to your friends, your family who know you best and say, well, what do you think I've got the best chance with? You know, do you think I'm doing the right thing if I do this? And talking it through with people does really help. If you keep it to yourself, you kind of get into this catastrophic thinking, which isn't realistic. You know, and also it's like, you take a risk, it doesn't work out. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah. I'm not gonna die from it. I don't think I will. So it's worth taking that leap of faith. I think every time it's worth taking it.
Yeah.
Whatever comes up, you weigh it up, you go, yeah, why not? I say yes a lot more as well. Just in general. Although I did say before that I turned down projects, but I said once I'm in a project, then I'll say yes a lot more. Like if someone suggests something or a different lyric or a different way of doing things, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's try that.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I mean that's a great place to end it with a nice uplifting, positive message.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. There's more details in the show notes about Alexis, where to find her online, her music, comedy sketches, and more. If you enjoyed this, check out some of our previous episodes where we speak to people about making creativity pay.